Good evening, and welcome to the new BUGAJSKI hour. Thank you, first of all, to RTK for hosting my show, and I'm happy, of course, to be in Pristina to examine important global and local developments that affect the lives of all people in Kosovo. Over the course of my shows, I will be discussing important political questions with major national, regional, and international personalities. And our guest today on the new BUGAJSKI hot seat is Kadri Veseli, President of Kosovo's National Assembly. But first, I would like to offer my political commentary on an important international topic, which is entitled Germany's Leadership Dilemmas. 25 years since Germany's reunification, Berlin's leadership role in Europe has been boosted by the treble crisis over mass migration, Greece, and Ukraine. However, serious doubts remain whether Germany has the capacity to ensure the EU's institutional stability and continental security without reviving Germanophobia and fostering further European divisions. All governments in Berlin have been weighed down by the angst of German nationalism. For decades, Germany has hidden behind the EU and NATO to avoid both the temptations and perceptions of dominance. But with Europe's future gravely challenged by recurring financial crisis in Greece, Moscow's attack on Ukraine and its threats against other neighbors, and an overflow of refugees from the Middle East and Africa, Germany has reached a defining moment in its post-World War II history. Berlin was afforded Europe's leadership role largely by default, as the US under President Obama disengaged and has been preoccupied elsewhere. Moreover, with France, Italy, and Spain weakening economically, and the United Kingdom focused on its own uncertain future inside or outside the EU, Germany is now Europe's reluctant hegemon among a union of small and medium-sized states with narrowing national interests. Berlin is engaged in a precarious balancing act. It does not want to be perceived as either directing Europe or providing inadequate leadership. With the continent facing the most serious challenges since the end of the Cold War, the EU remains knotted in contradictions. On the one hand, without Berlin's vanguard role, the Union would be in even more disarray. On the other hand, Berlin's predominance stirs fear and resistance, just as American leadership of the Western Alliance often generates resentful anti-Americanism. Chancellor Angela Merkel has played the pivotal role in consistently bailing out Greece, preventing the country from exiting the Eurozone, and precluding a potential implosion of the monetary union. But Berlin's decision against a Grexit will be sorely tested if, after receiving a massive third bailout, Athens once again simply tampers with its failed institutions and does not pursue far-reaching structural reforms. An even more menacing challenge faces Berlin. This is Moscow's escalating threats to Europe's security. The intra-German debate on Russia has focused on crisis management and economic cost, rather than the deeper security implications for Europe. A true leader places the economy in perspective when dealing with a more fundamental problem, and Germany has yet to pass that test. Despite the evidence that President Putin does not respect treaties, borders, or the national interests of any European state, some German officials continue to harbor illusions about the Kremlin. The Kremlin calculates that given German political and business interests, sanctions will eventually be lifted, and Moscow can focus attention on other targeted states in its neighborhood. And it remains unclear how far Germany is willing to support the Western aspirations of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and others, for fear of antagonizing the Kremlin. Even more worrisome, despite Putin's persistent threats against Poland and the Baltic states, Berlin has opposed the full protection of its neighbors by moving NATO bases eastwards. Anti-American streams in German politics and Berlin's appeasement of Moscow's imperialism remain grave areas of concern for the most exposed NATO members. Germany may be respected as an economic power among countries bordering Russia, but it is not trusted as a reliable security provider. But Germany's most immediate challenge remains mass migration. By the close of this year, the country could receive over 800,000 refugees. That is 4 times more than in 2014. Germany has become a country of immigration for those escaping conflict zones or in search of economic opportunity. Not surprisingly, Chancellor Merkel has declared the refugee overflow as a bigger challenge for Europe than the Greek crisis. Assimilating so many refugees is stretching Germany's welfare system, widening rifts in society as resentments grow against foreigners, and raising the profile of xenophobic nationalists who are staging protests and threatening violence. The refugee inflow could also contribute to further undermining EU integrity, as many governments will oppose Berlin's exhortations to permit more immigrants to settle in other member states. But without an effective common EU asylum policy, in which each country proportionately contributes to accommodating refugees, Germans themselves may loosen their commitments to the Union, even while celebrating their historical reunification. We'll break now for a few ads. We'll be back in a few minutes with our first interview with the Speaker of the Kosovo Parliament, Kadri Veseli.
Ka me pakon premium, ju sjell mundësinë të përfitoni shumë më shumë e të paguani më pak. Përcjell skuadrën tënde të zemrës në kanalet Super Sport, të gjitha kampionatet më të forta të futbollit, krenaria jon kuqezi, eventet të shumta të çdo lloji sporti dhe ekskluzivisht të gjitha sfidat e Euro 2016. Bashk edhe me gamën më të pasur programore nga çdo zhanër në kanalet unike të Digital. Merr pakun premium tani dhe përfito 15% zbritje në abonim 1 vjeçar. Gjithashtu përfito DigiGold me 5 premiera të filmave të sapo dalja nga kinemaja, çdo javë falas. 7 kanale të paketës gjigante Discovery falas të gjitha në shqip, TVM falas dhe VOD me 1500 filma, dokumentar, seriale të tjerë. Vizitoni dyqanin më të afërt të IPKOS për më shumë informata.
It's time for the new BUGAJSKI hot seat with my special guest, Kadri Veseli, the President or Speaker of Kosovo's National Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for joining me on the show, my first show in Pristina.
It's my pleasure, and I want to congratulate you for this new show in our public television.
It's a pleasure to be here. I've been coming to Kosovo since 1990, and it's good to be back on a more permanent basis. So, and again, thank you again for being my first guest. We have a lot of ground to cover. Parliament has been in the news a lot recently in Kosovo. And the Parliament faces a lot of challenges, a lot of important challenges in the near future. So let us try and cover each of the major issues in turn. And let me begin with basically the functioning of Parliament. Parliament itself, as you know, has been blocked by opposition parties, and the Prime Minister's speech was recently, unfortunately, interrupted. Obviously, Parliament cannot allow for such disruptions, but how can it be prevented in the future? Because from what I gather, you cannot allow security forces or police into the parliamentary chambers. So how can such obstruction of parliamentary procedure be prevented, let's say, in the future?
Kosovo is a young democracy. As you know, we suffered a lot in the past, and we are, all people of Kosovo were very happy when they were liberated and to have this right to have the democracy, to feel the democracy, and to enjoy the results of democracy. And actually, unfortunately, we are not in best time. Our parliament is moving in some turbulences, but we hope that with maturity and seriousity of all political factors, on all political forces which are involved in parliament, we will overcome this situation in order to show to our citizens that we are thinking seriously about their life and to improve their life in the same time to meet these standards, which are European standards, in order very soon to become part of a family of wide democratic countries, which is the European Union.
But the opposition action, I mean, I know it's obstruction, but on the other hand, it does indicate the passion in this country. The passion that's been unleashed particularly by the government signing this agreement with Serbia in Brussels on the municipalities, the Serbian municipalities. How would you respond to the opposition criticism what the government has done? Should this be more debated in Parliament before such decisions are made, before the signatures are given?
Of course, it should be more debate. That is the reason why even today I am calling up the opposition party to be part of the Parliament in order to have this opportunity there to discuss. Even if there is something to criticize, the government the Parliament is the place where we should put all our critics in order to request to government to be more transparent in the way how do they make the agreement. We are all trying to make our best here in this country, and I think, as I said, we suffered a lot in the past, and we have all to be serious and mature in the situation which we are going now through. But however, to blockade the Parliament is not the best way. That is chosen by opposition. They have to be more active. If they have to criticize, they have to be there in Parliament.
So in a way, the opposition is hurting its case rather than helping its case, because the thing to do presumably would be to allow the Prime Minister to explain what it is that's been signed and then debate it.
As the public knows, the Prime Minister was in Parliament in order to give the report by the parliamentarians in order to show what was the agreement, how the agreement was made, and what is the next step. But the situation which did we have in Parliament was not that what I think citizens of this country wanted from us. We have to change this attitude, and I hope the opposition will allow the government to have this report there in order to continue our work. If we come to the agreement which was made in Brussels, even if there is something critics on this issue, we have to debate in Parliament. To come to that point, we are a parliamentary democracy. We have to be there where we can speak freely and we can say what we have to say.
Is there a danger that these protests can escalate, both within Parliament and outside Parliament?
We are a newborn democracy, and we are a newborn state, and as a democratic country always exists the possibility to escalate something, but I don't think it's positive for development of this country and for people's life. I think it's better to come back in Parliament to discuss there the issue and to struggle based on institutions, not outside of the institutions. As I said, we were a long time out of institutions, out of political life. We suffered a lot. Now we have all the institutions. We have to respect these institutions.
Because the concern always in Washington as well as in Brussels is political stability in Kosovo. Could this unleash maybe political, social instability in the country?
That is another reason where we as politicians, we should all together think that Kosovo to become not an agenda of stability anymore, to become an agenda of, I think, of crisis. And not to become agenda of crisis, political crisis, refugee crisis. We need to become a country which has sustainable economic growth and politically stable in order to be integrated in Euro-Atlantic integration processes. That is very important. International community invested a lot in Kosovo, and Kosovars should make it, and we will make it.
I want to come back to the economic question and the refugee question in a few minutes, but let me ask you another political question which does involve Parliament directly, and that's the initiative to have direct presidential elections in the future in Kosovo. As you know, a directly elected president has a bigger mandate, a stronger mandate from the public. Where do things stand? What is the evolution of this process? Are we likely to have direct presidential elections next time round?
About this issue, there are just some initiatives or ideas, more or less. They are not concrete initiatives. And on institutions, we didn't have any initiatives like you mentioned. We are a parliamentary democracy. The election of president is made by parliament. But in order to have direct presidential election, we have to change, first of all, our constitutions.
What is the support for that in Parliament?
Yeah, we need to debate that. It's one issue that we should debate together in Parliament if it's needed, or we should continue like it was in the past. But there is not something specifically still when we are talking now.
Because there's a possibility of new elections as well, I believe, by next spring, general elections, parliamentary elections. Would they be combined with the presidential election?
Possibility is always, but we have a coalition which is very stable, made by two major parties, political force in our country. But what we need now, we need to have dialogue between us, more concrete, more serious, because this moment is a very sensitive moment, not just for this period of time. I think for our transition, how we will make it. We will be a successful country, or we will take such a long time in transition that we will waste our time just on empty political debates. People need a better life. That should be something that concerns us. People need to move freely in West country. That is something that we should bring to the people. And people need that the Republic of Kosovo become a stable democratic country which is very soon integrated in European families. And we hope to make that, and we have to make it.
Yeah, you don't want to become another failing state or a dysfunctional state, such as we view Bosnia, for example, at the moment.
Not at all. Kosovo is a stable country, and I am quite convinced that we will overcome this situation altogether by good understanding.
You mentioned the grand coalition with the LDK. You say the relations are good. Up to what point are they good relations? In other words, on the presidential election question, do you agree?
We have an agreement, a written agreement, which is signed by two leaders of political parties, by LDK, by actually Prime Minister Mr. Mustafa, and by PDK, by Deputy Prime Minister and Mr. Thaci. And it has to be respected that PDK is a major force in the country. We lead for 6% by second party, and we hope that we should respect each other, and we will respect each other. We will continue this coalition.
At least until the new elections.
What is most important, it doesn't mean that we have this broad coalition and to, I have to say, to majorize the issues. We have to dialogue, because the opposition could contribute very much in our political life and in these challenges ahead, which do we have as an independent country.
Let me turn to another question which has been preoccupying both Parliament and public, and that's this special court that was created to investigate alleged war crimes by members of the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army. Will such a court, in your opinion, will it discredit the goals and achievements of the KLA, or will a clear distinction be made between individuals who engaged in violations and abuses of human rights and the movement as such, the broader movement?
Let me remind the fact about this issue. We are the only country in ex-Yugoslavian which was asked to create something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, however, Parliament of Kosovo and Republic of Kosovo have taken up our responsibility toward the international community. And we want to show that we have nothing to hide. We are very proud about our past. KLA as organization was a liberation force. In the same time, we are convinced on that after this special court, the people of Kosovo, Republic of Kosovo, and the freedom movement of Kosovars was right, and we are proud on that. We have to move through this process because we have so many allegations which started to become obstacle for our independence. And that was the reason why we accepted it. And we will move on this process in order to show to all those who are skeptical on our independence and our political struggle for independence, to show that we were right.
Were there certain conditions made by international players, international actors, either allow for this court to function or else? Were there any conditions made?
Whatever the conditions are in this, that we made very transparent with law on changes on our constitutions. Mm-hmm. That they were, however, we cannot underestimate the fact that people's feelings people were not so happy for that. But politically, we had to move on this process, and we made it, and we will make it.
Will high officials that have been accused of involvement in some kind of war crimes also be investigated? Does anybody have political immunity or parliamentary immunity?
Nobody has any political or any called immunity in Kosovo. Everything could be investigated, but what is most important, it has to be stopped, the accusation against our people and our country and against Calais after this special court. That is very important, because there are a lot of concern by the people that a lot of accusations were made, not exactly against Calais, but against the international community, which they supported Kosovo's cause. We do not have something to hide. We will move on this process, and let's see the outcomes. However, it has not to become an obstacle for our political life and for the political process of for Republic of Kosovo in process of integration. Will it international integration.
Understand. Will it put you possibly in a difficult position, because some of your friends, some of your colleagues, comrades from the KLA could be under investigation? Would that put you in a difficult position?
It could be the case, because as we know, in the past there were cases where people were held in prison for years and years, and after that they were released as free. We have a Limay case, we have a Ramush Haradinaj case, we have some cases here in Kosovo. However, we all as Kosovars, we have to understand that is the price of our independence, and we have to pay it. Individuals has to pay something, whoever is, including myself, which I am very proud. I was one of the grounder of Calais.
Will you yourself possibly be under investigation as former head of intelligence?
It's something that I don't think so much. I think just that what we did good for this country, and we respected all rules in the process where we have to go through. The process of if we will be indicted or not, that is something that is not up to us. But we were freedom fighters, and we are very proud of our past. That is our situation.
Are there any other cases? I don't know of any other cases where a liberation movement or guerrilla movement subsequently came under investigation internally or externally for potential war crimes by certain individuals. I mean, are there other cases like this? Is this a precedent?
I cannot remember. Maybe it's not precedent, but I think, I don't know to be honest. But we made that, not to repeat myself, for sake of this country and for sake of citizens of this country, and we will move on this process. We were ready to pay the price for freedom with our lives, and now we have not to hesitate to move in any challenges that comes ahead.
My last question on this, how long will this process take? Is there a set timetable, set deadline for the court?
I hope it will take 3 to 5 years.
3 to 5 years?
Yeah, 3 to 5 years. And it was so promised, but you know how is international justice, and we have to stay out of that. We made our job as politicians. and now we gave the green light, and that has to be started now.
Will Parliament or the government play a role in the court in any way, or is this going to be staffed all by foreigners, non-Kosovars?
On the issue, or legal issue, yes, we had to play this role by approving the law, draft law, on special court, and amendments on constitutions. Yeah. And I think in the coming process, we have to ratify any agreement with a specific country where it will take place, this special court.
Okay. I'm sure we'll come back to this. If it's 3 or 5 years, there's going to be some. I'm sure there's going to be some controversies during the course of this process. But let me change subjects a little bit in terms of Kosovo's justice system. I mean, recently I read that the justice minister admitted that Kosovo citizens have lost trust in the justice system, and one persistent grievance, of course, is the perception of official corruption. That official corruption has not been dealt with, whether by domestic institutions, whether by ULEX and so forth. How widespread is corruption, would you say, in government and parliament? Is this something that's been handled now more effectively or not? Is this out of control?
Republic of Kosovo is not immune to corruption. We as institutions, and as Kosovars, we cannot underestimate the fact that corruption is here. But it's not something that is, how to say, enormous, taking in consideration the region. However, corruption is here, and we have not to tolerate it as institution. What is most important as institutions, we have to create this environment to struggle against corruption as phenomenon, and at the same time to create this motivation by the people to fight against it all together. I think nobody can do it better than Kosovars. Of course, having support of international communities, assistance, but Kosovars to make by Kosovar judges and prosecutors, and at the same time by Kosovar witnesses. We have to encourage the people to our justice system, but the phenomenon is not something that is enormous than in the region. Maybe we are in better situation, but what is very important in our case that is positive news and positive message that people do not tolerate the corruption. That is good. They have to be just more proactive in order to fight it.
Because I don't come to Kosovo regularly, I'm not up to date on particular investigations, particular trials. Have there been any high-level investigations, trials, arrests, imprisonments of corrupt officials?
There have been many developments in creating the legal framework and structure to combat corruption involving all stakeholders.
Stakeholders or stakeholders?
Stakeholders. Results have already started to be visible in this situation, because we had even in public some strong cases by fighting against organized crime and corruption. However, what is most important, we have to encourage the people and to motivate them not to tolerate the corruption and to be more, to become more partners in this fight against corruption. People by themselves and Kosovars. When I speak to Kosovars, Kosovar judges and prosecutors, they have to be more active because that is their country and they have to take responsibility.
Yeah, notoriously, reforming a justice system is a long process, not just here in Kosovo, throughout the region. Justice system and law enforcement. How is that proceeding? In other words, to bring in more honest prosecutors and judges and so forth.
I think we have good position. On legal framework, we are good. Comparing to our region, maybe we are better. What is most important, however, to create this optimal environment between the people, among the people, to fight the corruption. And our judiciary system must be more active, not just to make empty statements that will how to say, create more confusion that will help in fighting organized crime and corruption. They have to become more proactive, not to be afraid. We need those heroes who will fight corruption, because corruption, it means poverty of the nation. And in the same time, two priorities we have to have. Economic reforms, economic growth, in the same time fighting organized crime and corruption.
My last question on corruption is ULEX. What is ULEX's role here? They've had their own scandals as well, I know. Should ULEX continue? Has it been effective, or should the mandate be ended next year?
I think they should mandate ended next year, but not the assistance. They have to take their responsibility in that sense of supervision. But the Kosovars has to take their own responsibilities in their own country. That is very important. But however, let me say some few words about EULEX on ANMIC in the past. We as Kosovars, we do not have a right to accuse EULEX or ANMIC in the past for fighting organized crime or corruption. Kosovars has to make by themselves, because that is their own country and they have to make it.
Sure, that's a very good point, but ULEX was supposed to enable you better to combat corruption. So the assessment has to be, how successful has ULEX been over the past 6-7 years?
I think Kosovar people, even the officials in Brussels, are not happy with the mandate of ULEX here, with the results, outcomes, and it has to be ended.
Okay. Another question which closely involves Parliament is the strategy that's been passed now, that has been pursued by the government to crack down on radicalism, violent extremism, religious extremism and terrorism. I know the Prime Minister has stated that the new strategy and adoption of a law banning participation in foreign wars, and with now an application, I believe, for membership of Interpol, Kosovo's application membership of Interpol. Kosovo is now part of the anti-terrorist coalition, global anti-terrorist coalition. Is there a danger stemming from this that Kosovo itself could be a target for ISIS or ISIL terrorism in the future? Are you concerned about this?
Of course we are concerned, because we had our institutions had some sensitive information that could be a target country of ISIS. And that makes us worried. That is the reason why it's very important Kosovo to finalize the security structures, becoming integration on this international organization like is Interpol, and creating a Kosovo forces. That will help in strategy of preventing any attack, terrorist attack. Kosovo cannot be immune of this danger, and but as country we undertook many measures. As country, we are one of the first country which adopted the law against foreign fighters, and our security institutions are very active and very successful on this process. But we need to make more, on the international community, especially security organization like is Interpol has to accept Kosovo with fully membership, and Kosovo Army as well, because it will create better condition for security here as in Republic of Kosovo, in order to prevent any such possible dangers.
But do you coordinate, I mean, do you share intelligence and monitoring with your neighbors, with Macedonia, with Serbia, Albania, other countries?
As Speaker of Parliament, I am not that who can give maybe the appropriate answer, but we have all the, how to say, options, and there are a lot of alternatives where our institutions work in good partnership with neighbor countries and in global world, and that is one part of our success, especially with United States, neighbor countries and European countries.
Are you concerned at all? I mean, I hear this sometimes in America, that religious radicalism, Salafism, Wahhabism, jihadism is on the rise amongst Albanian communities. I didn't notice it particularly in Albania, but is there a danger in Kosovo that this could be a threat in the future?
I don't believe such kind of people can threaten Kosovo. They can make damage in Kosovo. They can have isolated action, terrorist act against Kosovo, but to have any influence, not at all in Kosovo.
It's not political,
less
social,
maybe than in Holland or maybe in Germany. Less. However, we are not underestimating the fact that it's a potential danger by those groups, but what we have to give some merits in this process of neutralizing such kind of people. We have to thanks to our imams here, which are very, very moderated, and they are very good. And we have to work together, our institutions, with how to say that in our Islam community here, which are very good. We, as Parliament, very soon we will adopt a law on the religion in order to prevent any misuse of finances to bring the people, especially young people and poor people, to manipulate by some so-called NGOs here in Kosovo with suspicious financial means.
Although one has to be very careful with laws when you're trying to fight violence, potential violence and terrorism, not to restrict opinion, not to restrict opinions that differ from even the majority opinion.
Till now we are good and we will continue that.
But the reason I'm saying is that this laws against extremism have been used in some countries to fight against the political opposition.
Yeah, there are such concepts, but I don't believe that Kosovo will be that case.
You're not a Russia.
We have just to prevent the risks. All that we are doing is to prevent the risk. In Kosovo, the people are free to express their beliefs on their speeches, and sometimes they are not, even if they make any public damage, nobody is calling them for penalties.
Sure. Let me turn to another question which is preoccupying not just the region but the whole of Europe, which is the refugee crisis. And there is an impact in Kosovo and from Kosovo, because I gather that tens of thousands of Kosovars have actually left the country as refugees, or some seeking asylum, some economic refugees in Europe. When I say Europe, in the rest of Europe. And after Syrians and Afghanis, I think Kosovars are the third largest category, I read somewhere. Kosovars or Albanians in general. How does this affect Kosovo itself when you have so many people leaving, particularly young people, skilled people, potentially hard-working people, and presumably they're leaving because there's not enough opportunity for them here in Kosovo? How do you address this?
When we started our interview, when we discussed about the parliament work and the parliamentarians' duty, I was thinking that has to be our duty, to think about these young people, young generation, how to make better lives to them, how to make perspective to them to live here. Without having sustainable economic growth, we cannot bring those people to encourage them to stay here and to have here the perspective. Unfortunately, in January and February, as a country, we faced with refugee wave. It was a huge manipulation that especially Germany and some of West European countries are requesting for some young people, for refugees. And in this manipulation, unfortunately, our institutions failed to neutralize these traffickers. However, now we have a better situation, and we hope that in near future there will be very, very few Kosovars who will leave its own country. On the issues of refugees, Kosovo as a country is not a transit country for those refugees from Syria. we sympathize with people of Syria because we suffered a lot. On 90s, a lot of people from my country has to leave their homes. That is not a good situation. We hope that the things will be changed. But Kosovo, for its own, it will make all effort that people of Kosovo stay here and to become an optimistic country in order to attract people to come here to live, not to leave the country, especially our youth population.
This is what always surprises me. When Albanians leave Kosovo or leave Albania, they do very well, in America in particular, but also in Europe. Entrepreneurs, workers, professional people, very skilled, very talented people. Some of the best actual students in America, Albanians. Why is it that they cannot do this here? What's holding the country back?
But we are a newborn state. That is one issue. And the other issue that is where I think we are failing is that we cannot find that clue, that key to overcome this economic situation where we can start a blossom of our economy. We have to make it because Kosovars has strong entrepreneurship spirit. In the past, they were not supported so much by institutions. They have to survive by themselves. And we can make it, and we will make it. But it is needed maybe more time and more patience. People, especially young people, has not to leave the country, has to fight here in positive sense to make us as politicians every day with critics to make us aware that we must change the situation here in Kosovo economically, but not to spend too much time on empty politics, just debating, arguing on empty issues.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems, not just in Kosovo but in the region, I always find is that there's a big public sector and not such a thriving, productive private sector. In other words, investment, foreign investment, enabling the private sector to blossom, entrepreneurship. There seems to be blockage in many respects from the public sector vis-à-vis the private sector. Not just here, we see this also in Greece, we see this in EU member countries in the region. Why is this the case?
We have a strong public sector, of course. In the same time, we have good private sector, but we have as well a strong grey economy, unfortunately. That is something that we have to stimulate, this grey economy to become more legally, to become more legally, in the same time to create better environment for investors here in Kosovo on legal issues which will attract them to become legal. In that sense, we will be more successful. And I think that story of success issues the European countries and West countries will see very soon in Kosovo.
Let me ask you one last question on the refugee, the outflow question. Where does the EU visa liberalization policy stand vis-à-vis Kosovo? Kosovo has been the only European country in this region that hasn't had such a policy with Europe. All your neighbors have. Where do things stand? How is this going to evolve?
When you asked me about the refugees, Kosovo refugees in European countries, I didn't want to mention a fact that one of the facts why the people of Kosovo, especially young generation, left Kosovo is a psychological issue, because being too much isolated, that creates concern by young population. Can you imagine a young Kosovar, 20 years old, being isolated, not having the right to move abroad, and thinking all the time about the West culture? Because Kosovar people are pro-West oriented, strong pro-West oriented. And that is a concern. And European countries, especially on the issues of these refugees from Syria, they have to understand better the situation of Kosovo, and Kosovars has not to become victim of acute movements like our refugees in Syria or something else. And they have to give the right Kosovars to move freely, because 1/3 of our population is in diaspora. They used to live in Germany, in Switzerland, in Austria, in European countries. Majority of them, they are fathers, they are sons of these people which are here. And one more issue about visa liberalization. Kosovars do not like so much to live abroad. We are strongly tied with our home country.
You mean all roads lead back to Kosovo?
We want to move. We want to become free like other people. And we are Europeans. And Europeans, we respect each other very much, but we are all European.
But the question I asked was, where does the EU now stand on the visa liberalization? Is this likely to happen anytime soon?
It's hard for me to speak about that because we made a lot of mistakes as politicians by mentioning exactly date. I'm not going to mention exactly date, but what I am going to say is that we Kosovars have to think to create here options to live here, not to leave our country. Not in any case. We have to attract the people to come here. Kosovo has all potential to become a strong economic state, and we will make it together. In the issue of visa liberalization, that is what European Union is doing now, is injustice, and they have to repair it, because it won't help us as Europeans. The young people will remember that one day their patriots from European Union, they stop them, they block them. It has to come that in 1 month, in 1 year, or in 10 years has to come. I hope very soon. But
hopefully the sooner the better, and I hope this refugee crisis doesn't delay the process.
No, it's unfair if the officials in Brussels makes any decision by influence of the events of Syria. We are a European country, and they have to take in consideration the fact. They have to respect us as Europeans, because we believe in Europe, we trust Europe, and we are Europeans.
Let me go back to Parliament specifically. In terms of interparliamentary relations, which countries do you have very strong, which parliaments in which countries do you have particularly strong relations? Before I interview, I asked you about the US Congress. Maybe you can tell us that as well, how that is developing.
US Congress is supporting a lot of Parliament of Kosovo. Maybe permanently, every second month we have some delegation in Congress of United States. And in the same time they are supporting us here in Kosovo. We maintain good relationship with neighbor countries, with all parliaments of neighbor countries, including some MPs of Republic of Serbia, women, they were in our parliament. We have a twinning project with Hungarian Republic of Hungary, Parliament of Republic of Hungarian. We have good relationship with Bundestag, with all parliaments here in European countries, and even in those countries which didn't recognize still Kosovo, because one of my priorities was parliamentary diplomacy, because in some cases, in some countries which didn't recognize Kosovo, we can have good relationship with parliamentarians of those countries in order to create these preconditions recognizing Kosovo.
In terms of the recognitions, it's a question if we had time, I was going to ask. What is the stage now? There's 5 countries, EU countries, that still have not recognized Kosovo. Is that likely to change?
I hope yes, because we have a very positive signals by Greece. They recognized our passports. By Slovakians.
I think the Greek foreign minister invited the prime minister to visit, I believe, Athens.
Yeah, they had no election, and we are expecting to have this government in Greece. But we have good situation by those 5. At least 4 European countries which still didn't recognize Kosovo. And we hope that including Spain, the situation will
Except they have their own
improve.
problems at the moment.
Yeah, but Kosovo is a completely different situation, and we respect a lot Spain. And we hope that Republic of Spain will recognize Kosovo because it's in their good. It's not something that has to be related our situation with their specific situation in Spain. Actually, what is happening now. We respect the sovereignty of Spain, and we expect that Spain will recognize Kosovo one day.
So Greece could recognize Slovakia, Romania, Spain. The toughest nut will probably be Cyprus.
Cyprus, okay, we hope that all these 5 European countries will recognize Kosovo, which have membership in European Union, because it will help us, it will help the region, including Republic of Serbia. We are a European country, and we belong to them.
Of course. My very last question concerns international membership of international organizations. As you know, there is a bid by Kosovo to join UNESCO, which I think is extremely important, the cultural heritage organization. And there'll be a battle, I think, with Serbia over this question. But an equally important question, and I'm a big football fan, is joining UEFA. In other words, what are the chances, and I'm very interested, even though I live in Washington, I watch a lot of European football, what are the chances that Kosovo will take part in the 2018 World Cup qualifying competition or the 2020 European Cup competition?
I hope that we will have that opportunity very soon. And we have very good soccers in so many European world countries.
Half the Swiss team are Albanian.
We are just preparing the invitation for all of them, because we want not just to have this right to be part of these games, but to win. And Kosovo will become a strong competitor in these games. And I hope that Kosovo will become that right, because there are good signals, by the way. In the same time, in UNESCO, I hope that we will get this membership. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs is working very hardly, even including these days in New York. I hope that very soon we will get this membership, because it's in good of the region. It's not just in good of the Kosovo.
Of course.
Our cultural heritage has to be preserved by international standards, and we need the UNESCO.
Culture
and FIFA is especially.
Culture and football, two important parts of integration.
Football is something special. Has to be. Has to be. We have such a good players all around the world. We have to bring them back here. We have to show what Kosovo can do.
Good. Kadri, Veseli, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for joining me on the show. Unfortunately, our time has run out already. I'd like to have you back at some point in the future, but in the meantime, good luck, best wishes in your important work for the people of Kosovo.
With all my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. BUGAJSKI. You are very well known in Kosovo. I want to use this opportunity to thank you for everything what you did for people of my country. Thank you, and that is a great opportunity that Kosovars will have this opportunity to have you once per month in our public television.
Unfortunately, we have already come to the end of today's show. I have greatly enjoyed being with you and with my new colleagues here at RTK. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy, be productive, and remain optimistic. See you all very soon. Miro Pavshim.